How would you improve Godzilla's character in the MonsterVerse? Okay, there's a lot that needs to be done to improve Godzilla's character in my opinion. First of all, I would start out with, we really need to establish Godzilla's abilities. Godzilla at the moment is way overpowered, and in my opinion, and I know I'm not the only one, I know at least some of you guys feel this too, Godzilla's boring as hell at the moment. He's so overpowered that all we do is just sit there while he slaps things around, and especially because I think New Empire is not a very well choreographed movie, and I also think it's a very poorly shot movie. The battle in Rio, you can almost barely tell what's going on. It's just like things throwing each other around, and the camera's too chaotic, and it just looks ugly in my opinion. And like Godzilla, when he shows up, he's just hitting things and it doesn't matter anymore. Whereas in Godzilla 2014, Godzilla was getting his ass whooped, and because of that, every hit he got on the Mutos mattered so much more, because it was like, if he doesn't land that hit, this could be it for him, you know? And so when he finally pulls off the win, it was really, really exciting. Godzilla versus the Ion Dragon is kind of a different scenario, because it wasn't really like a main battle as much as it was like this 3-minute little side battle where Godzilla just gets to lay into this creature for a second, which is fun. This is the big difference. The stakes of that scene in Monarch Legacy of Monsters are not, is Godzilla going to beat the Ion Dragon? We already know he is. The stakes in that scene is Lee Shaw and the gang going to get back into the pod and be sent to the surface? That's the difference. In Godzilla 2014, the stakes are, is Godzilla going to defeat the Mutos? That's why it matters so much more that Godzilla needed to be at a disadvantage, because we need to engage in the conflict. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, the stakes are, is Godzilla going to defeat King Ghidorah? And we have seen twice Godzilla can fight King Ghidorah, especially in the sea, but has not been able to defeat him yet. And we also see during the final battle in Boston, Godzilla's going to die because he's entered a powered up state, and Ghidorah is kicking his ass, making it even more intense and getting us even more invested in this fight. And so when Godzilla does pull off the win, it does feel more satisfying. It's also important to note, King of the Monsters gives Godzilla 2 upgrades. It allows Godzilla to supercharge with the use of a nuclear bomb, and allows Godzilla the ability to go burning mode. But both of these things come at an enormous price. Godzilla supercharging is literally going to kill him in a matter of hours. Godzilla going supercharge mode, it means everything, and there is a active countdown we're fighting against. Godzilla going burning mode, it only happens because he's already in his supercharged state, and Mothra has to die to accomplish it. It makes it so much more interesting that there are active consequences to these supercharged states. GVK I think is a little different because Godzilla doesn't supercharge or anything like that, and the stakes is who's gonna win, Godzilla or Kong, not necessarily who's gonna die. But then the end of the movie does a really, really good job getting us to be like, the stakes are they going to defeat Mechagodzilla? And we see Godzilla's getting his ass whooped. It's really important that Godzilla loses the fight with Mechagodzilla, because it makes us engage so much more in that conflict, and it makes us need the Godzilla and Kong team up to pull it off. New Empire, Godzilla's been stated that he can defeat Scar King, and he enters an energized state with no consequences, and he enters an evolved state with no consequences. There's no consequences to those actions. Godzilla can just supercharge and become more powerful than ever before. We have no reason to believe they're not going to beat Scar King and Shimo. We're told already that Godzilla was able to do this on his own back in the day, and now he's got help. It's just to see monsters throw each other around. So that's the biggest thing you need to do. If you're going to move forward with the MonsterVerse, you need to establish what Godzilla can and cannot do. Where is his power limit? Like in 2014, we clearly saw Godzilla was slow. That was a big disadvantage. Godzilla's gills were a weak point. If he's shot in them, he gets hurt. If he's stabbed in them, he bleeds. If he's knocked down by the Mutos, he can die. Godzilla King of the Monsters tells us if Godzilla enters an evolved or energized state or whatever, supercharged, the consequence is he could die. I honestly think we need to find out in the next Godzilla Kong movie that Godzilla's lifespan has been dramatically shortened by his evolution. I think we need to find out that Godzilla's lifespan is dramatically shortened. It has either weakened him now that he's like wearing off of that energized state, you know? There needs to be a price to it. Do you see what I'm saying? There needs to be a price to it. That's the biggest thing, is understanding what Godzilla can and cannot do and what the consequences of these supercharged states are. Otherwise, nothing matters. Otherwise, we're just waiting for Godzilla to supercharge again, slap another monster around, and the credits to roll. There's no stakes, and none of it matters, and it loses us. It loses me. And if it loses me, the guy who owns all of this, the guy who's dedicated so many years to Godzilla, if it loses me, it's losing general audiences as well. We need to know what the consequences are of Godzilla's actions for him, to him. And from there, there, we need to understand why Godzilla does the thing he does. Why did Godzilla kill Tiamat rather than just sending her running? Why did he kill her? She charges him. Is that enough? Is that all it takes for Godzilla to kill them, is for them to charge him? Because then he's not a very good king of the monsters. He's no longer protecting nature's balance, he's protecting his ego. That's all it is. If Godzilla's really willing to kill a titan who was serving a vital function like Scylla, who was reversing the ice melt, if he's willing to kill her because she comes on land in Rome, then he's not looking out for the environment then, is he? You know, we need to know, like, why has Godzilla done all these things? And I'm not even saying that Godzilla's in the wrong for killing Scylla. I think he's absolutely in the right. But we need to understand more of the Godzilla motivation. Why is it that some monsters he will kill and some monsters he will spare? I see you're saying that he freed her in the comics. The comics are not canon. The comics are not read by the filmmakers. They're not read by the writers of the movies. They don't matter to the films, and because of that, I can no longer accept that as an answer. And plus, by the way, a movie needs to stand on its own without a comic supporting it. A movie cannot have a comic support it. A movie can have a comic develop things in a more interesting way that didn't matter to the film as much. Like, I think Skull Island: The Birth of Kong does a very good job of that. I think Godzilla Aftershock does a very good job of that. I think that all the other comics do a very bad job at that, because they essentially hold the hand of the film so that the film doesn't have to have as good of writing, because the comic is there to pick up the slack for it. That's not acceptable. So we need to find out, why is it that Godzilla does what he does? Why will he kill a Tiamat, but then other monsters he won't? We really need to understand, what is Godzilla looking after? Is he looking after nature's balance, or is he looking after himself? I feel like the longer you develop Godzilla in the MonsterVerse, the more confusing I find his character to be, because in 2014 he's so clearly a noble samurai warrior kind of guy looking out for nature's balance, trying to stop this parasitic species that could overpopulate the whole planet. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, he has a specific arch nemesis, like the Joker, who can destroy the entire world and who has been rivaling him for centuries, who commands the monsters in a way that he can't, and that's a direct threat to him because it directly threatens nature's balance and his own life. Okay, I just realized this while editing this video, but the thing that I have always been complaining about old rivals for is because I just realized why the only time in the MonsterVerse I felt the old rival angle made sense or worked was with King Ghidorah. Well, on the surface it was like, well, you know, because Ghidorah is Godzilla's oldest rival, you know, Godzilla and King Ghidorah, they've been rivaling each other since 1964, and they're in movies with each other constantly, and Ghidorah is Godzilla's Joker, he always shows back up. That's not why. I don't think that's why, because King Kong and Godzilla have had an older beef than Godzilla and Ghidorah, but it didn't have the same effect. It is because, specifically, Godzilla and King Ghidorah, that's the only time we've had an old rivals plot where the two of them actually have different ideologies and represent things differently thematically. King Ghidorah represents chaos and destruction. Godzilla represents order and balance. Those two things conflicting with each other over centuries makes Godzilla's victory over Ghidorah so much more rewarding. Scar King represents ego. Scar King is an egotistical dictator who represents the worst aspects of humanity in a movie where Godzilla is portrayed as an egotistical dictator who beats up other people like Kong simply because he doesn't want to see their perspective. It muddies up all the things going on. There isn't a thematic conflict between Godzilla and Scar King or Shimo. It is simply a power struggle, which is not as interesting. Same with Godzilla and Kong. There is no thematic quality to that. It's just Godzilla hates Kong because he hated his ancestors. There is no actual beef between the two of them. It just doesn't work the same way. Also, I just gotta take this second to say, in a movie where people try and argue that Godzilla Kong the New Empire has some depth because it's like, you know, it's a movie about Kong saving Zuko from like the abusive Scar King, and it's about Kong saving this ape kingdom, liberating them. In a movie where like the whole thing is like Kong's gonna save Zuko from a child abuser, it's weird to me, and it never sits right with me that Kong physically abuses Zuko on screen more than Scar King does. Kong uses Zuko as a weapon, and I think that entirely destroys any thematic weight that that movie could have had. Anyways, back to the discussion. In Godzilla vs. Kong, I cannot wrap my head around why Godzilla fights Kong, because Kong isn't threatening nature's balance. He's not supposed to be off the island. How does Kong leaving Skull Island threaten nature's balance? Wouldn't Godzilla want Kong to return to the island if his whole thing is balanced? Isn't that what he would want? Wouldn't you want to put Kong back on the island and not drown him at sea? Why does he blow up Hollow Earth? Blow up Kong's temple? Because Kong found the axe and Godzilla took that as a threat to his ego, not to nature's balance. Godzilla's arc with Mechagodzilla makes sense, because Mechagodzilla is directly a threat to the Titans, and Godzilla wants to protect the Titans. New Empire. Sometimes I'm on board with Godzilla, because like, yes, Scylla's destroying big portions of the population, and she's no longer serving her purpose to nature. But what about Tiamat, who's just sleeping? He wakes her up and then kills her. So I think we really, really need Godzilla to have stakes to understand his limits, to understand the price of his actions, and then to understand why it is he does what he does. That's the key to fixing Godzilla in the MonsterVerse. That's what we need. Kong picking up the axe, that's a shot at Godzilla's lineage. Why does Godzilla give a shit? Kong is down in Hollow Earth. Godzilla doesn't go to Hollow Earth. He doesn't care about Hollow Earth. His whole deal is the nature balance on the surface. What does Kong have the axe have to do with that? It's just an ego thing. Is Godzilla egotistical, or is he a noble deity? That's what we need to know. Are you kidding? Godzilla lived in Hollow Earth to rest. Godzilla did not live in Hollow Earth. Godzilla lived in a temple which is no longer in Hollow Earth, as we're told in Godzilla vs. Kong. It is in a tunnel that is sort of, kind of near Hollow Earth. It's on the way there. Godzilla's temple is in a tunnel that connects the surface world to the Hollow Earth. Godzilla doesn't go into the Hollow Earth. It's the whole reason, if we're gonna look at the expanded canon, the whole conflict, the entire conflict of Godzilla Dominion comes from the fact that Godzilla needs a new source of radiation and his temple has been blown up and he does not go into the Hollow Earth. And he finds another tunnel that is like in another sort of pocket of Hollow Earth that's by itself where he can suck up radiation and be fine, because the movies present something different than the expanded material, and that's a problem. And the movies are also too vague about why Godzilla does what he does. Godzilla's just a jerk. Why does he go after Kong and try and kill him in New Empire? Why does he go so hard against Kong? Is he too dumb to realize that the battle gong is telling him that Scar King is back? Maybe so. Why didn't he supercharge when he needed to fight Ghidorah? Why didn't he go and evolve? Why didn't Godzilla go into Tiamat's lair, which would have been by itself Tiamat's lair, which sucks up all the radiation from the sun and is the biggest stockpile of radiation on the entire planet? Why didn't Godzilla go there to get his energy when he needed to fight King Ghidorah? Why is it that Godzilla went to that temple, which would have revived him in decades? Maybe he thought Kong was the threat. Maybe Godzilla feels the battle gong from the Iwi. That's what we're told in the New Empire, which I think is a really, really dumb plot development. I think it's really poorly written and really poorly included. Godzilla feels the Iwi's battle gong, and he knows that a big threat is coming. So he goes and he sucks up all the radiation in France, and then he goes and he kills Tiamat so that he can eat her DNA and evolve, and then he's gonna move into her little lair. He's gonna suck up all the radiation and enter the Godzilla evolved state and become the most powerful Titan on Earth, but as Jared Krzyzewski says, still not the most powerful Titan in Hollow Earth. You know who is the most powerful Titan on Earth? King Ghidorah, who Godzilla was well aware was going to wake up. Do you know how I know? Because Godzilla visits Antarctica. He finds out that something's going on with where Ghidorah's frozen. He then goes to Outpost 54, alerts Monarch that there's a problem, and brings them with him to Antarctica, where he takes on King Ghidorah. And without the Argo jet swarming Ghidorah and overwhelming him and sending him running, Ghidorah would have killed Godzilla. So Godzilla was aware that Ghidorah was going to wake up. Is it because he didn't have enough time to hyper evolve? Well, then why is it that he doesn't go do that in between the fights? This is what I get so frustrated about, is if Godzilla knows that Scar King and Shimo are the threat in the Hollow Earth, then why does he fight Kong in Egypt? That's a waste of his time. Godzilla's either dumb or he's not. I'm gonna go on another rant here, you guys. You guys gotta get me off of these rants. We are told that the Iwi battle gong rings every couple years. We're told that Godzilla heard the Iwi battle gong at the discovery of Skull Island in 1973. We're told that Godzilla heard the Iwi battle gong before Ghidorah was awakened in 2019. Well, hey, if Godzilla heard the Iwi battle gong before Ghidorah was awakened in 2019, why did he not attack a nuclear power plant, suck up the radiation, and then go live in the layer that would eventually become Tiamat's and suck up the radiation there to evolve in order to fight Ghidorah? Why is it that Godzilla heard the same battle gong many times throughout history and has not reacted the way he did today? The real reason is because they shouldn't have included that stupid scene where Bernie explains that Godzilla heard the battle gong before the events of King of the Monsters and before the events of Kong Skull Island. It's a bad development that complicates the lore of the series. He didn't know that it was going to be Scar King and Shimo when he heard the battle gong. He just understood that the battle gong was ringing and so he had to evolve. Well, he's heard this battle gong before. It was the time he fought King Ghidorah and he did nothing about it. He didn't do shit. He heard the same battle gong and he just let it slide. Why didn't he evolve? Because he was not prepared to fight Ghidorah. He gets blasted down that chasm, and if the Argo didn't scare Ghidorah off, Godzilla's dying in that fight. You cannot say that Godzilla gets so angry because he doesn't know who the threat is and that's why he goes after Kong. That battle gong, if you read Bernie's notes, that shit rang when the moon landing happened and before the events of Godzilla vs. Kong. Godzilla should get to the point where that battle gong is like the boy who cried wolf and he's like, oh man, this thing again. Okay, what are the humans up to today? Am I the only one who thinks that Godzilla's too old. Like, Godzilla having an infinite lifespan, I think kind of minimizes his actions in that it's like nothing matters because it's all old news to him. It's more exciting to see a character who has to experience things for the first time than a character who has experienced everything. And it's also like Godzilla's gonna outlive the MonsterVerse so much. Godzilla's gonna be around for so long after the MonsterVerse, unless he dies, that it will be such a blip on his grand lifespan that it doesn't matter to him. It's so small. I don't know, I kind of think it's sad. Maybe if they develop that where it's like there's a real loneliness to Godzilla where he has been around for so long, he is so lonely, and that's maybe one of the reasons he's such a jerk. That'd be great, and you could develop that if you introduce a son of Godzilla. That'd be interesting, especially if you say Godzilla's at the end of his lifespan. But I don't know. I think that the Heisei Godzilla's more interesting because we see his entire lifespan happens over the course of like 40 years. The entire lifespan of Heisei Godzilla happens in 40 years, and the majority of the events that he goes through, they happen within about like a 15-year span, and it makes him a much more complex and interesting character. We get to see so much more development because all of his history is something we experience with him. Godzilla being too old makes his new form not make any sense, and also shows he's not very smart in combat since he's literally millions of years old. I actually never thought about that, but that's silly. Dude, you know Toho not gonna allow them to kill Godzilla. Godzilla 93, you're wrong, man. This is something that I think is really silly. There was that like, Toho published 3 new rules for Godzilla. Number 1 rule, Godzilla can only eat radiation and he cannot be seen eating other things. Number 2, Godzilla cannot die. Number 3, what was number 3? Godzilla can't show too much emotion, was that what it was? Those rules have been around. I think they've been around since the 80s, but those 3 rules, those have been around, and you know what Godzilla's done multiple times since then? Straight up died. The thing that they wanted, the important thing for Toho, it's why technically every single movie where Godzilla dies, Toho fulfills this promise. Godzilla cannot die without another Godzilla being born. At the end of Godzilla 1998, Godzilla dies, and they show that one egg survives and the egg hatches, and we see there is a rebirthed Godzilla. That's why Toho allowed it. In 1995, Godzilla melts down and dies, and in the wake of that, Junior is reborn and in turn becomes the rebirthed Godzilla. Toho does not want Godzilla to die and be dead, period. They want Godzilla to be an everlasting symbol. If Godzilla dies, he has to come back. He has to be reborn. They can fully kill Godzilla in the MonsterVerse so long as a son of Godzilla exists. And if a son of Godzilla exists, like Junior shows up, you can kill the original Godzilla. Actually, I think if a Godzilla Junior shows up, the chances of Godzilla dying, they astronomically skyrocket. Because all of a sudden, you can kill Godzilla and you can get away with it. Thank you all for watching. Big thanks to the people in the live stream. Big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Big thank you to the channel members. I really appreciate you guys. See you guys next time for the next one. D-Man, out.